It is 8 a.m. in New York and 5 a.m. in Los Angeles. It's 1 p.m. in London and 10 p.m. in Sydney, Australia. But wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I'm happy that we're off to another start of a 5-day week of 5 shows of LOA Today. That's always a pick-me-up for me. I always get to start off with my good friend Louis. And I can just see him sitting there with his dark hair that he was commenting on before we got started. How you doing, my friend?
Very good, thanks, Walt. How are you today?
Doing fine, thank you. And it's been quite the weekend around here. Alex and my sister PJ and I are, of course, putting together this audio podcast, The Grass is Greener, and we're on the final rounds of our auditioning and doing second auditions and so forth. And, oh, God. I mean, I have two feelings on it, Louis. One feeling is it's just incredible, the amount of talent that have applied to be a part of this cast. And the second feeling is, we only did, I think we had like 14 or 15 people that were interviewing yesterday and just doing some reading throughs and things like that, compared to, say, the old style casting process where you'd have a cattle call and 500 people would be lined up to get 1 minute in front of the director and like next. I mean, just doing 15 is tiring. I can't imagine either being the director or the people in line waiting to do it the way they used to. I mean, you had to be really dedicated to your art in order to do that. You had to, because, I mean, otherwise you're exhausted.
But I'm sure the guys were very clear about what they wanted, and they could see very quickly if they...
Especially the ones that succeeded, yeah.
I mean, I watch something like X Factor, and you just smile, you know, how do those judges sit through those first weeks?
Yep. Yeah, it's a challenge, but on the other hand, the results are proving to be truly amazing. We still haven't finalized who the characters are or who the actors are going to be for the different characters. We are pretty much convinced that we're going to be using multiple actors for characters, you know, so you can cover differences in schedules and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is trying to match up. Okay, does her voice sound like her voice? Is it close enough that they can do the same character and all that kind of thing? It's great. But it's fun. It's good. Yeah. So we are talking about Richard Bach today.
Back to Richard Bach. I love that.
Yeah. Monday is Richard Bach Day now, at least for a bit. 3/4 of the way through this book, and it's a book that you and I have loved for years, and we're hoping that our listeners are loving it. Actually, just in terms of the listenership, lately on the Monday show, I would say that listeners are growing into it. They're liking it more and more. So
great.
It's a good topic. That's good. And I keep coming back to the same theme over and over again, how Richard was so far ahead of his time in terms of so many of the concepts that we now know through teachers like Abraham. Abraham, of course, teaches them in much greater depth, but wow, he was one of the early ones who just really got it.
Early ones in our generation, but I mean, I'm guessing that the Egyptians had a very advanced take on it as well, and so did maybe the Lemurians, if you believe in any of that.
That's probably true, yeah, except they didn't speak English, so it was kind of hard for me to follow them.
But you were an Egyptian in that lifetime.
Yeah, but I've forgotten how to speak Egyptian. So.
No, I'm talking about in that lifetime.
Oh, I see, okay. Well, the only thing I have is now, so I'm just thinking in terms of now.
Yeah. You can tap into those past energies.
I know. Well, it's not something I've done a whole lot of. I know you've done some, and I know others have done some too. And it's one of those things that is kind of fascinating from a distance for me. It's not something I've been wanting to get into. But before we get into Richard, what is it about that you really like a lot? What draws you into that?
Well, something I was reading in Illusions just now, when I was touching up on what we're going to do now. Kind of talking about tapping into, you know, past vibrations, etc. So, you know, Richard or Donald was saying, you know, you can tap into any past life and play an instrument that you used to play before in this life. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's really quite beneficial, I suppose. What other word would you use? You know, to tap into your medical knowledge from a previous life, to tap into, and it doesn't even have to be your life. You can tap into the vibration of a medical doctor. You can tap into just believing and understanding and having no resistance that you have the knowledge to do anything, literally anything. So it's fascinating when you start being able to say, my gosh, Abram is right. You can be or do or have anything you want. And it just kind of blows your little mind. It was like, we are right.
So it does expand the possibilities in a huge, huge way. So I can see that there's that attraction to it. And I think we have all experienced that to one degree or another.
To one degree or another, absolutely, yeah.
I remember when I was first learning to play piano when I was, 5 or 6 years old. And at first it was a little bit difficult. And then all of a sudden it clicked. And I have a feeling that click was me connecting in some way to prior me or some other,
and lowering your resistance, kind of a combination.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And once it clicked, then I loved it. It was fun.
Do you still play?
I haven't played in years. I need to get to a place where I have a big enough room to put a piano in, because I don't want to. I mean, I want to have some electronic too, but I want an actual, grand piano to play because it has its own sound that no electronic can ever reproduce.
This is true.
Yeah, I love it a lot. Anyway, we are on illusions. Oh, and I got to get the messages done too. I need to get into this habit and stay in this habit. The messages,
doing them early, yeah.
Doing them early, getting them done so I don't forget about it. So first of all, if you're not yet a subscriber, hey, what are you waiting for? Become a subscriber. We have a different show every day of the week. We're doing shows 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And you don't really want to miss any of them. Our loyal listeners don't. The numbers, interestingly enough, Louis, the numbers are becoming very, very steady from one show to the next. It's demonstrating that people are listening to this show and the next show and the next show. Yeah, it's really, really encouraging. So if this is new to you and you haven't heard from us before, by all means subscribe. And it's very simple to do. Just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. And right at the top, you will have instructions designed especially for your device, whatever device you're connecting with, to help you become a subscriber and get all of our lovely episodes coming right to your device every single time that we publish them. And then, of course, subscribe and share is the motto. So, be sure you share with friends and family and anyone who you think might be interested in this. Don't do it with the enemies. You'll just get a lot of fights out of that. But with friends, for people who you think would be, at least receptive to it, share it, because everybody needs a daily dose of happy, right? So subscribe and share, and also make sure that you're subscribing, if you're interested anyway, in listening to the video version of this, because we live stream this on YouTube. And we would love to have you be a part of the live stream audience. But even if you just want to be able to play it back, watching us as we sit here with our microphones and our headsets and so forth, by all means, subscribe on YouTube and then click the little bell next to it so you get notified every single time that we publish on YouTube. And those are our messages for the day. So before we get into the book, do you have any final words to inspire us about what we're talking about with illusions?
Just wanted to say to everybody, grab a copy of the book. I mean, you can get it in, I think, almost every version. Actually, I don't think Audible's got a copy of it. I've never seen it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's not a surprise.
I would have bought it. I've been an Audible member for many, many years, and I've got all the classics there. Autobiography of a Yogi, I heard you were talking about the other day. I've got that on audio as well. I really like that.
Oh, is that right?
And, all the classics, Course in Miracles and things like that. So, if it was on there, I would have bought it.
Well,
every month I get into audiobooks.
So we'll send a message, LOA today to Audible. You got to get Illusions by Richard Bach onto your system.
I think it's probably up to Richard himself to get it done. They need his permission, don't they?
Tap him on the shoulder. I mean, and then send him our way for an interview.
Use the law of attraction.
That's right. Yes. So anyway, we're on chapter 15 of Illusions, and we've been through quite a few of the adventures so far as Richard has been learning how all this stuff works, the stuff that is not called law of attraction in the book, but it's pretty clear that's what we're talking about. He has had an interaction with a vampire. He has practiced making clouds go away. He has drawn a blue feather into his life. I mean, he has all these little exercises he's been doing, and you kind of get the sense he's getting better and better at it, even though, like most of us, he keeps convincing himself that he's really not very good at this. Funny thing, isn't it?
Argue for your limitations and they're yours.
There they are. Right there. I even used that phrase in a conversation today, or not today, this week. So yeah, this is influencing me as well. So chapter 15, once again, begins with a quote from the Messiah's Handbook. And it says, "The truth you speak has no past and no future. It is, and that's all it needs to be." That's kind of what we were just talking about in terms of drawing from other lives and so forth, because the truth just continues to be true. So the chapter begins, "I lay on my back under the fleet, wiping oil from the lower fuselage. Somehow the engine was throwing less oil now than it had thrown before. Shimoda flew one passenger, then came over and sat on the grass as I worked. Richard," he said, "how can you hope to impress the world when everybody else works for their living and you run around all irresponsible from day to day in your crazy biplane selling passenger rides?" He was testing me again. "There's a question you are going to get more than once." "Well, Donald, part one, I do not exist to impress the world. I exist to live my life in a way that will make me happy." "Okay," he said. "And part two?" Well, part two, everybody is free to do whatever they feel like doing for a living. And part three, responsible is able to respond, able to answer for the way we choose to live. There's only one person we have to answer to, of course, and that is ourselves," Don said, replying for the imaginary crowd of seekers sitting around. "Well, we don't even have to answer to ourselves if we don't feel like it. There's nothing wrong with being irresponsible. But most of us find it more interesting to know why we act as we do, why we make our choices just so. Whether we choose to watch a bird or step on an ant or work for money at something we'd rather not be doing." I winced a little. "Is that too long of an answer?" He nodded. "Way too long." "Okay, well, how do you hope to impress the world?" I rolled out from under the plane and rested for a while in the shade of the wings. "How about I allow the world to live as it chooses, and I allow me to live as I choose?" He threw a happy, proud smile at me. "Spoken like a true Messiah. Simple, direct, quotable, and it doesn't answer the question unless somebody takes the time to think carefully about it." Try me some more. It was delicious to watch my own mind work when we did this. "Master," he said, "I want to be loved. I'm kind. I do unto others as I would have them do unto me, but still I don't have any friends and I'm all alone. How are you going to answer that one?" "Beats me," I said. "I don't have the foggiest idea what to tell you." "What?" "Just a little humor, Don. Liven up the evening, a little harmless change of pacer there." "Well, you'd best be plenty careful how you liven up the evenings. Problems are not jokes and games to the people who come to you unless they are highly advanced themselves, and that sort know their own Messiah. So you are being given the answer, so to speak. Try that beats me stuff and you'll see how fast a mob can burn a man at the stake." No, I don't know about you, Louis. That would be enough for me to just stop right there. But Richard continued. I drew myself up proudly. "Seeker, thou comest to me for an answer, and unto thee I do answer. The golden rule doesn't work. How would you like to meet a masochist who did unto others as he would have them do unto him? Or a worshiper of the crocodile god who craves the honor of being thrown alive into the pit? Even the Samaritan who started the whole thing. What made him think that the man he found lying at the roadside wanted to have oil poured in his wounds? What if the man was using those quiet moments to heal himself spiritually, enjoying the challenge of it?" I sounded convincing to me. "Even if the rule was changed to do unto others as they want to be done to, we can't know how anybody but ourselves wants to be done to. What the rule means and how we apply it honestly is this. Do unto others as you truly feel like doing unto others. Meet a masochist with this rule, and you do not have to flog him with his whip simply because that is what he would want you to do unto him, nor are you required to throw the worshiper to the crocodiles." I looked at him. Too wordy? "As always, Richard, you are going to lose 90% of your audience unless you learn to keep it short." "Well, what's wrong with losing 90% of my audience?" I shot back at him. "What's wrong with losing all my audience? I know what I know, and I talk what I talk, and if that's wrong, then that's just too bad. The airplanes are $3 cash." "You know what?" Shimoda stood up, brushing the hay off his blue jeans. "What?" I said petulantly. "You just graduated. How does it feel to be a master?" frustrating as hell. He looked at me with an infinitesimal smile. You get used to it, he said. That's the end of chapter 15. Any comments before we move on?
Yeah, let's dig into the truth you speak has no past and no future. It's all that it is, and that's all that it needs to be. Mm-hmm. So, the definition of the word truth is something I just wanted to dig into there.
Okay.
Truth is another word very much like belief, isn't it? It's just a thought you think often.
And is it a thought that we think often, it becomes truth, but nevertheless, it just seems like it's objectively true to us. Why is that?
Well, if you think about it often enough, it manifests an active vibration, and that's what you constantly bump into, so you get validation for your truth. So really, the only truth is that the law of attraction will bring you more of what you think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the rest is what you want to think, you know. But all of that is in the now, is what they're talking about there. There is no past and no future. So even if a active vibration from the past is affecting you now, it is activated by you in the past. And if you are affected by a vibration of somebody else, then you are allowing it to affect you. It's like I had this heated discussion, I'll say, in the sauna the other day.
Okay.
This guy was arguing for the fact that he doesn't totally create his own reality.
Ah.
So I said to him, okay, so to what degree do you create your reality, and what degree do I control you? Mm. And he didn't like that for a second. So
sure, yeah.
I said to him, did you like the idea? Do you believe that you can not agree with anything and everything I say? Do you think you have that power? He says, yes, definitely. I can refuse to agree with what you're saying or not saying. I said, great. So can't you do that on all subjects? And yeah, he wasn't too happy about all that either. He literally stormed out of the sauna, but his mum was quite keen to carry on chatting to me all the time. She was much more into this.
That's funny.
And he was really trying to get his mom on his side, but she wasn't having any of it. It was quite fun. Oh, dear.
Yeah, it sucks when people don't behave the way you want them to behave, I tell you.
So it is, and that's all there needs to be. So, yeah, what is really is just the active vibrations, and the active vibrations that you've had activated in the past, or that you are allowing that are in your environment to currently affect you. So, yeah. But again, your choice, how much you want to allow that. So, yeah, I love the aspect of that I love is how much power it gives you and how much control over your own life it gives you, how much confidence you start getting with it, and how much you can start healing yourself and getting more money and more this and more of the things that you want. As somebody was saying in the Law of Attraction group, I don't want money or cars or anything like that. You know, I just want to be, you know, kind, loving, helpful, nice kind of person. And we're so, well, fine. You know, there's nothing stopping you using the law of attraction, to manifest all that kind of things as well. So, yeah, it really was quite fun to watch that whole process in the sauna, because the guy was very, very clear in what he believed, but he wasn't happy when the fabric of his belief structure started shaking a bit. It was
right. Yeah.
It was a little too much for people, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. And the other thing he said to me in the sauna, which was very interesting, he said, you know, you just want me to agree with you and to believe what you're wanting me to believe. And then, you know, I kind of really looked inside and said, if I wanted that, if I really wanted them to agree with me and believe what I'm saying, I would have lost already. I would have lost the instant I wanted them to agree with me, because it doesn't matter how much I want to convince you, Walt, that this is the way it is. you're still going to take that information and make your own decision, aren't you?
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if I just generally or gently give you an idea and you take it and run with it, or if I try to force you, it's really going to make no difference. At the end of the day, the person who's receiving it has the choice to take on that information or let it go.
And you might try to make it, covered with a spoonful of sugar to make it easier for me to accept it. But still, I'm the one who's deciding whether to accept it, even under those circumstances.
Yeah, but I'm a whip guy, not a sugar guy.
Well, remind me to get you angry, that's for sure.
It's interesting. Different teachers, you'll often find they're usually one or the other. They're more sugar orientated or more whip orientated. And you'll find the students that are more interested in learning in that form will choose the appropriate teacher. It's really, really interesting getting into it.
By the way, I do have to comment that a spoonful of sugar is absolutely disgusting.
Okay, that's a whip.
I mean, anybody's ever tried that? It's like, oh, God, what did I just do?
Oh, Walt, you're so beautiful and pretty. You're going to slap me.
Give me something to counteract that. It's too sweet.
And it's interesting. A lot of people that I bump into are more the warrior type, the fighters or the people who like the hard lessons rather than the want the sweet loving type of lessons. And
I ran into somebody like that just a few days ago on Facebook. I'm pretty sure he was just trolling. He joined a law of attraction group, and it was very clear he had absolutely no belief at all in law of attraction. In fact, he was 100% convinced it was all, in his word, bollocks. Everything was bollocks from his viewpoint. And he was just there to start fights and, stir up trouble and so forth. It was interesting. And he was kind of passive aggressive about it, in that somebody had posted something and he posted something that said, well, that never works. And he just kind of left it there. And me not realizing he was there to troll, I responded to him, and all of a sudden he's blowing up in my face like, oh, well, this is interesting. An interesting choice going on here. Okay. But this guy clearly was doing it because, even trolls, they troll because they think they're going to get something out of it. They think there's a benefit, some sort of an advantage.
Well, they want a reaction, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they want a reaction, and they want the energy of that reaction. So I gave him a little bit of reaction, and he gave me some pushback, and I realized where we're going. I said, okay, well, thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah. I also noticed here in the book that they were talking about how to speak to a seeker, telling them that it's all rubbish is not necessarily the best way to go about it, and you could find yourself stoned or hanged or whatever. And it's interesting because when you do portray something to somebody, when you do portray an idea or a concept to them, there are ways in which they can easily accept it, and there's ways in which they will definitely want to run a mile. So you learn, and it's great because the law of attraction really helps you understand this when you're speaking to different people, how to relate differently to every individual.
Right.
And to work with where they're at, where their vibration is, because if you're starting to throw huge concepts at a beginner, it's just going to go straight over their heads. And if you're going to feed beginner stuff to new guys, it's also not going to go down very well. So, yeah, that was one aspect. And then he was going into, remember the vampire story, do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Right.
So you've got the whole concept that here you are, and a lot of people believe that you should do unto others as you would have done unto you. I think it's a Christian thing more than anything.
Oh, yes.
And it is so completely flawed, and a lot of people haven't really got that yet, that it's flawed. I mean, this one lady on the Law of Attraction group was saying, why do I keep on bumping into narcissistic people? And I said, that's probably because you don't realize that everybody's narcissistic, even you.
Oh, well, yeah, that didn't work for her, I'm sure.
Not necessarily the best way to answer a question. may be true, but it's a bit of a slap in the face.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you got a reaction out of it.
I don't think I did, actually.
No, really?
I don't know. I never went back and had a look. I usually get a notification on Facebook saying somebody replied to your message, but nobody did.
Yeah.
But, it didn't bother me either way, because it really is a tough concept for a lot of people to grasp,
It is.
I'm a suicide bomber, so I don't expect you to go around being a suicide bomber. It's just, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
But it's interesting to understand what a suicide bomber actually wants. They don't just want to kill themselves and blow up people. They want people to understand their plight that nobody else seems to be care about or be looking at. They want to amplify that. That is their focus. Mm-hmm. Their focus is not about going around blowing themselves up.
Yeah, it's almost a way of expressing their rage, their determination to obliterate the enemy and all that.
No, I don't think there's much of that in it. I think that is just a platform for getting people to look at their plight, at their problem, so that they can get a solution to it. So, I think the West has portrayed it as, they just want to blow up people. It's not. I don't believe that that's really their focus at all. But who knows what's going on in each individual's mind?
Well, that's the trick, because very often we don't know. I have to keep reminding myself of that. No matter who it is I'm talking with, I have to remind myself, I don't know what's going on in that person's mind. I can infer certain things, but my inferences might be wrong. I may draw an inference that just doesn't even match what's going on in their heads at all, and I got to remember that.
But that's okay. When people get things wrong with me, I still learn, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, when I say I've got to be careful about that, basically what I'm expressing is my own desire. I don't really want to be offending a whole lot of people. I mean, sometimes I say things that other people are offended by, and sometimes it's just like, well, okay. I mean, if you don't want to deal with that, that's your problem. But other times it's, oh, geez, I wasn't trying to make you feel rotten there. I was just trying to help you understand the concept. So sorry if I made you feel rotten, even though, of course, I couldn't really make them feel rotten. But nevertheless, that's the way they felt it. So
as Abram says, if people are rude to you, you say, wouldn't it be nice if people were nicer to you? If you were rude to other people, you would say, wouldn't it be nice if I was nicer to other people? So when you know what you don't want, you have a better idea what you do want. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's similar to another conversation I had on Facebook where the guy he was posting about how there were all these people who were posting these really terrible things when we should be posting about positive things all the time and so forth. And I thought to myself, well, that's an interesting thing. And I was kind of gauging, like, how much does he really want a response? I wasn't sure. But I kind of decided he was willing to accept the response. So I responded to him essentially along the lines of what you're talking about there, that, people have different reasons for what they're doing. Sometimes they like to explore the contrast. Sometimes they prefer that. And if you don't like it, well, you don't have to explore it. It's not like you're required to just because you see somebody you don't particularly like. I have two choices, and at times I take one route, and other times I take the other route. The choices are, well, I can just ignore it and focus someplace else, or I can engage in it because I want to engage in that contrast. And usually my rule of thumb is, if I feel like I'm going to make myself feel worse, I probably choose to go in another direction. But it's up to me to regulate that. And he thought I was basically just refusing to fix the problem. So what are you going to do?
Perspective, use it or lose it. That's what
that's right.
Illusion says. Use it or lose it.
So anyway, let's see. We are through chapter 15. Shall we get on to 16?
Just one thing at the end here. It says,
oh, sure.
Well, congratulations, you graduated. How does it feel to be a master? Frustrating as hell.
Mm-hmm.
He looked at me with that infinitesimal smile. We'll get used to it.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. So in chapter 16, he starts off by talking about, of all things, hardware stores. Hardware stores are always long places, shelves going back into forever. In Hayward Hardware, say that one 3 times fast, I had gone hunting back in the dim, needing 3/8-inch nuts and bolts and lock washers for the tail skid of the fleet. Shimoda browsed patiently as I looked, since, of course, he didn't need anything from a hardware store. The whole economy would collapse, I thought, if everybody was like him, making whatever they wanted out of thought forms and thin air, repairing things without parts or labor. Boy, there's a great example of I'll argue for your limitations right there.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, my gosh, that's the thought that a lot of people would have, though.
It is, yeah. I mean, to me, I look at that same situation. I say to myself, it's not an economy collapsing. That's an economy stabilizing. What are you talking about? So, I mean, anyway. At last, I found the half-dozen bolts I needed and journeyed with them back toward the counter, where the owner had some soft music playing. Greensleeves. It was a melody that has haunted me happily since I was a boy. It played now on a lute over some hidden sound system. Strange to find in a town of 400 souls. Turned out it was strange for Hayward, too, for it wasn't a sound system at all. The owner sat tilted back on his wooden stool at the counter and listened to the Messiah play the notes on a cheap 6-string guitar from the sales shelf. It was a lovely sound, and I stood there quiet, there paying my 73 cents and being haunted again by the tune. Perhaps it was the tinny quality of the cheap instrument, but it still sounded far misty, other century England. Donald, that's beautiful. I didn't know you could play the guitar. You didn't? Then you think somebody could have walked up to Jesus the Christ and handed him a guitar and would have said, I can't play that thing? Would he have said that? Shimoda put the guitar back in its place and walked out into the sunlight with me. Or if somebody came by who spoke Russian or Persian, do you think any master worth his aura would not know what he was saying? Or if he wanted to skin a D-10 cat or fly an airplane, that he couldn't do it? So you really know all those things, don't you? Well, you do, of course. You do, too. I just know that I know all those things. I could play the guitar like that? No, you'd have your own style, different from mine. How do I do that? I wasn't going to run back to buy the guitar. I was just curious. Well, just give up all your inhibitions and all your beliefs that you can't play. Touch the thing as though it was a part of your life, which it is, in some alternative lifetime. Know that it's all right for you to play it well, and let your non-conscious self take over your fingers and play. That's exactly what I was just talking about 20 minutes ago about playing piano. That's exactly how I felt. I remember reading this too, and remember reading, that's exactly how I felt. I had read somewhere about that, hypnotic learning, where students were told they were masters of art and so played and painted and wrote like master artists. That's a hard thing, Don, to let go of my knowing that I can't play a guitar. Well, then it will be hard for you to play the guitar. It will take years of practice before you give yourself permission to do it right, before your self-conscious mind tells you that you have suffered enough to have earned the right to play well. Well, why didn't it take me long to learn how to fly? I mean, that's supposed to be pretty hard, but I picked it up pretty fast. Well, did you want to fly? Nothing else mattered. More than anything. I was looking down on clouds and the chimney smoke in the mornings, going right straight up in the calm, and I could see... Oh, I get your point. You're going to say you never felt that way about guitars, did you? You never felt that way about guitars, did you? And the sinking feeling I have right now, Don tells me that is how you learn to fly. You just got into the travel air one day and you flew it, and you've never been up in an airplane before. My, you are intuitive. You didn't take the flying test for your license? No, wait, you don't even have a license, do you? A regular flying license. He looked at me strangely. The whisper of a smile as though I had dared him to come up with a license and he knew that he could do it. You mean the piece of paper, Richard? That kind of license? Yes, the piece of paper. He didn't reach into his pocket or bring out his wallet. He just opened his right hand, and there was a flying license as though he had been carrying it around waiting for me to ask. It wasn't faded or bent, and I thought about 10 seconds ago it probably hadn't existed at all. But I took it and looked. It was an official pilot certificate, Department of Transportation seal on it. Donald Williams Shimoda with an Indiana address, licensed commercial pilot with ratings for single and multi-engine land airplanes, instruments, and gliders. You don't have your seaplane ratings or helicopter? Well, I'll have those if I need them, he said. so mysteriously that I burst out laughing before he did. The man sweeping the walk in front of the International Harvester place looked at us and smiled, too. And what about me? I said. I want my airline transport rating. You're going to have to forge your own licenses, he said.
I love that statement.
You're going to have to forge your own licenses?
Yeah. Well, nobody else can do it for you, can they?
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
Create your own reality.
Well, I mean, I suppose that would be possible for somebody to forge it and hand you the piece of paper, but you wouldn't have acquired the license either through forging your own or through earning it or anything else. It would just been a piece of paper that was handed to you.
You manifest it into your life, even if somebody else does it for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. But when you do it yourself, I think that's where the meaning comes in, because like you said, we focus on something, and as we focus on it more and more and more, it acquires more and more reality, acquires more and more truth.
Physicality, yeah.
Yeah, it has physicality, it has all that stuff, yeah. So I think I always wondered about the stories of the Bible, the Christian story about Jesus and, his travels and disciples and all that kind of thing, yeah. And it occurred to me that from the point of view of the people he was trying to teach, since it wasn't their lives, it wasn't as meaningful. They really needed to learn how to do it themselves, which never really happened. Well, at least not directly. He always
said, I want to make you fishers of men.
Right.
Yeah, I want to teach you how to fish, not spoon feed you yet.
Right, yeah. But so often, so much of the stories were told as if he was doing everything, even though there were stories where the other people who he was healing or he was teaching in some way were actively doing it themselves. That part of the story was always left out, which I always found fascinating.
There's a reason why he was crucified.
Yeah. Is this a little foreshadowing on your part, Louis?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Oh, good grief. Okay, well, we're getting closer and closer to the defining moment. Shall we move on to 17, or did you have more you want to talk about on chapter 16?
Let me just go through. So, talking about instant manifestation, I don't know if you've ever heard the master called Sai Baba.
I've heard the name, but I really don't know anything about him. Yeah.
So you've got this master with this huge frizzy hair. He passed away 5 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. So he was famous for being able to instantly manifest ash in his hands and give it to his disciples endlessly.
Oh, you've mentioned him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, even in this world, in this life, there are people who can instantly manifest. I mean, I'm sure some people will say that's not true and he had some up his sleeve and blah, 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 blah. But,
Actually, that wasn't my first thought when I heard that. My first thought is, he can't do any better than Ash, really?
Well, he had what is common to a lot of masters, is the ability to be in bilocation. So he was in many places at the same time, reportedly, et cetera, et cetera. Mm. So he had a lot of the normal skill sets of advanced beings. Mm-hmm. And bilocation and being with many of his students at the same time is quite common. Mm-hmm. But, what I'm saying is if you speak or you look on the internet and troll, you'll find that there are people who have instantly manifested things. And it's, you probably look at your own life and you probably find there's a few things that you've instantly manifested, something you didn't have too much resistance to, and it's just, wow, where did that appear from?
Yeah.
So, you just start scaling it up to get more and more and more. There's a fascinating story about Sai Baba's ash with Carolyn Mace.
Okay. Can you remember?
Yeah. So somebody gave Carolyn Mace some of Sai Baba's ash, and she always treasured it and always had some good experiences around it, etc. Then one day she read an article saying Sai Baba had misused a young boy or something like that. And it flashed through her mind, I wonder if this is true. And after that, everything started falling apart for her on any and every level. And she came to quite a few realizations about that. And the ash vanished, and I don't know, there's a whole lot of things about it, but it was a great story. If you ever get the opportunity to listen to Carolyn Mace's story about that, it's well worth the listen, because it really puts the whole context into, you know, people judging other people based on specifically something as arbitrary as TV or news. Or newspapers. So, you know, they're just sensationalists, and even if it was true, it's none of your business. It's got nothing to do with you.
Well, that will rub a lot of people the wrong way. It would probably rub me the wrong way in some ways, because I just dislike very intensely the idea of people being abused. So, you know, I can see where people would react to that.
You do totally believe people can be abused?
I don't include the word totally in there. I think there's a cooperative element that goes on. But
could it ever have happened to them at all if their thinking was not in alignment, if their vibration was not?
No, of course not. But I also know that most people are not in alignment all the time. It's part of the reason we're here is for that. But also, they're still learning. I mean, I'm still learning. I've been learning a lot. I'm probably more advanced than many people. And I look at how much more I have yet to learn about how to do this, how to maintain my control, how to focus on what I want, 100% of the time instead of 60% or 80% or whatever. So I'm sympathetic to those who are still learning it. But even more, there's something about the energy of behaving abusively toward others, specifically where, because you're implying like a sexual abuse or some sort of physical abuse. There's something about that just, I really don't want to be a part of that at all. I don't want to have anything to do with that in my life. I don't want to in any way demonstrate my love for it or acceptance of it, because I just dislike it so much. Now, do I understand that I'm creating a limit in my own mind? Yeah, sure. Of course I'm creating a limit in my own mind, but that's a limit I choose readily.
But I was just tellowing up. It's probably more than 14 seconds you were pushing against it verbally now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm having
so you're just going to draw that towards you. So, it may be time to just give up that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I also have learned the value of counteracting. Like, we have to describe stuff sometimes here on the show that is unpleasant to us. So you counteract it a moment later by saying, but here's what I prefer instead. I prefer treating people well, and I like it when other people treat other people well. I really love it when we treat children well, because we have so much to learn from children. I mean, children are amazing. They have so much they can teach us about the connections that we have to our spiritual side, to our source energy side, because they have a closer tie to it than we do. They haven't lived long enough to be, quote, disconnected, unquote, from it in any ways, even though you really can't ever be disconnected. But, we kind of learn how to kind of turn our head away from it, so to speak. Well, they haven't done that. So in many ways, they are our teachers. And I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. So
they're far more in alignment.
I just spent like 14 seconds counteracting it, right?
Yes. A little bit longer, which is even better.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
So, just have a quick look here. So, manifesting that license instantly is something when you read the book for the first time, you're right.
Yeah.
Just opens your hand and this perfect document, even with his middle name, William, and his address, etc., manifests. I just look at my own mind and I think of how much resistance I've got to being able to do that. It's massive. And you really, when you look at that resistance, you really see with clarity why you can't do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I first read this book, because it's example after example after example of how this guy instantly manifests stuff. And every time we came up upon one, I would go through all these little machinations in my mind. Well, it was sleight of hand. Well, maybe it wasn't sleight of hand. Well, it's a fiction book. It doesn't really exist. But does it exist? And just going at it in all these different directions and so forth, all of which demonstrated that I really didn't believe any of it, that I really doubted all of it, and that I had these huge resistances to all of it. But I really wanted them.
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing about the book, when you're coming from that angle of non-believing or not understanding to reading the book, you feel your emotional guidance system gives you very positive emotion with regard to instant manifestation. So you're confused because your past history of belief structure wants to counteract I'm feeling good about what I'm listening to here. And that whole conflict goes and until Abram came into being, and it's only 3 years ago now, and started filling in all the blanks, did I really understand it? Before then it was like just a fantastic book. Now it's a fantastic book I understand.
Yeah, it is a fantastic book, and I really remember just spending a lot of time just mulling through it, and how could this be true? Could it be true? Is there a way it can be true? No, that can't possibly work. But how could he's telling the story like he really believed it? I mean, did Richard actually experience this, or did he just make stuff up?
Put my head in, yeah.
I mean, all
as
these
you said,
thoughts.
that's a good sign of a good author.
Yes. And there was also the part of me that could tell deep down he had tapped into something that I was pretty sure even he didn't understand. But
not
he was expressing it with a great deal of clarity, which was admirable. That I think is the great beauty of the book. The degree of clarity he was able to achieve despite his own confusion on the subject was literally brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he was able to tap into the vibration of advanced information. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Most definitely, without any doubt. Not necessarily fully understanding it, but very much like Esther tapping into the Abram type consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay,
so,
now we can go on.
We're up to a challenging chapter. This is where things start to come to a pitch here, because we've already had the foreshadowing that, you want to be careful what you say to a crowd. Well, we're about to find out what happens when you don't say things carefully to a crowd. Chapter 17. On the Jeff Sykes radio show, I saw a Donald Shimoda I had never seen before. The show began at 9 p.m. and went till midnight from a room no bigger than a watchmaker's, lined about with dials and knobs and racks of tape cartridge commercial spots. Boy, does that sound 1970s. Oh, my goodness. Sykes opened by asking if there wasn't anything illegal about flying around the country in an ancient airplane taking people for rides. The answer is no, there is nothing illegal about it. The planes are inspected as carefully as any jet transport. They are safer and stronger than most sheet metal modern airplanes, and all that's needed is a license and a farmer's permission. But Shimoda didn't say that. Well, no one can stop us from doing what we want to do, Jeff, he said. Now, that is quite true, but it had none of the tact that is called for when you are talking with a radio audience that is wondering what is going on, these airplanes flying around. A minute after he said that, the call director telephone began lighting up on Sykes' desk. We have a caller on line 1, Sykes said. Go ahead, ma'am. Am I on the air? Yes, ma'am, you are on the air, and our guest is Mr. Donald Shimoda, the airplane flyer. Go ahead, you are on the air. Well, I'd like to tell that fellow that not everybody gets to do what they want to do, and that some people have to work for their living and hold down a little more responsibility than flying around with some carnival. Well, the people who work for a living are doing what they most want to do, Shimoda said, just as much as the people who play for a living. Scripture says, by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou earn thy bread, and in sorrow shalt thou eat of it. Well, we're free to do that too if we want. Do your thing. I get so tired of people like you saying, do your thing, do your thing. You let everybody run wild and they'll destroy the world. They are destroying the world right now. Look at what is happening to the green living things and the rivers and the oceans. She gave him 50 different openings to reply, and he ignored them all. It's okay if the world is destroyed, he said. There are 1,000 million other worlds for us to create and choose from. As long as people want planets, there will be planets to live on. That was hardly calculated to soothe the caller, and I looked at Shimoda astonished. He was speaking from his viewpoint of perspectives over lots of lifetimes, learnings only a master can expect to recall. The caller was naturally assuming that the discussion had to do with the reality of this one world. Birth is the beginning and death is the end. He knew that. Why did he ignore it? Everything's okay, is it? The caller said into her telephone. There's no evil in this world? No sin going on all around us? That doesn't bother you, does it? Nothing there to be bothered about, ma'am. We see just one little fleck of the whole that is life, and that one fleck is fake. Everything balances, and nobody suffers, and nobody dies without their consent. Nobody does what they don't want to do. There is no good, and there is no evil outside of what makes us happy and what makes us unhappy. And none of it was making the lady on the phone any calmer. But she broke suddenly and said simply, "How do you know all these things that you say? How do you know what you say is true?" This is where I start to lose track of Donald Shimoda. "I don't know that they're true," he said. "I believe them because it's fun to believe them."
No, I completely get that.
I get it now, but at the time I was like, where are you going with this?
That is so cool.
I narrowed my eyes. He could have said that he had tried it and it works. The healings, the miracles, the practical living that made his thinking true and workable, but he didn't say that. Why? Yeah, that was the question I had. Why? There was a reason. I held my eyes barely open, most of the room gray, just a blurred, fuzzy image of Shimoda leaning to talk into the microphone. He was saying all these things straight out, offering no choices, making no effort to help the poor listeners understand. Anybody who's ever mattered, anybody who's ever been happy, anybody who's ever given any gift into the world has been a divinely selfish soul, living for his own best interest, no exceptions. Boy, I remember reading that, and that word selfish at the time, there was no way that the average reader was going to accept it the way he was saying it. It was just not going to happen. Anyway, it was a male caller next while the evening fled by. "Selfish? Mister, do you know what the Antichrist is?" And for a second, Shimoda smiled and relaxed in his chair. It was as if he knew the caller personally. "Well, perhaps you could tell me," he said. "Christ said that we have to live for our fellow man. Antichrist say, be selfish, live for yourself, and let other people go to hell. Or heaven, or wherever else they feel like going." "You are dangerous. Do you know that, mister? What if everybody listened to you and did just whatever you felt like doing? What do you think would happen then?" "Well, I think this would probably be the happiest planet in this part of the galaxy," he said. "Mister, I am not sure that I want my children to hear what you are saying." "Well, what is it that your children want to hear?" This is where it starts to become familiar because I do this sometimes too. "If we are all free to do whatever we want to do, then I'm free to come out in that field with my shotgun and blow your fool head off." "Well, of course you're free to do that." There was a heavy click on the line. Somewhere in town there was at least one angry man. The others, and the angry women too, were on the telephone. Every button on the machine was lit and flashing. Now, it didn't have to go that way. He could have said the same things differently and ruffled no feathers at all. Sifting back over me was the same feeling I had in Troy when the crowd broke and surrounded him. It was time. It was clearly time for us to be moving along. Unfortunately, the handbook was no help there in the studio. It said, "In order to live free and happily, you must sacrifice boredom. It is not always an easy sacrifice." Jeff Sykes had told everybody who we were, that our airplanes were parked on John Thomas's hayfield on State 41, and that we slept nights under the wing. I felt these waves of anger from people frightened for their children's morality and for the future of the American way of life, and none of it made me too happy. There was a half hour left of the show, and it only got worse. "You know, mister, I think you're a fake," said the next caller. "Well, of course I'm a fake. We're all fakes on this whole world. We're all pretending to be something that we're not. We are not bodies walking around. We are not atoms and molecules. We are unkillable, undestroyable ideas of the is, no matter how much we believe otherwise." He would have been the first to remind me that I was free to leave if I didn't like what he was saying, and he would have laughed at my fears of lynch mobs waiting with torches at the airplanes. And that's the end of that chapter. Now, that's a little bit terrifying compared to where we've been in this book before.
Oh, I did love that. Absolutely.
What was your first reaction when you read that the first time? Do you remember? Because I mean, that's a tough chapter to come up against. That starts to blow your mind the first time you read this, if you're not familiar with Abraham and so forth.
Yeah. It's it's interesting because somebody was trying to lynch me the other day. They were trying to, because sometimes I talk from the is point of view that Richard was talking about. He was talking about from the oneness point of view, and sometimes I talk from the physical one life type point of view. And in discussion, you really need to be able to understand which one you're coming from and relate it to the individual you're talking to, so that everybody's clear about, are you coming from the isness or are you coming from the separation? And somebody was throwing this back and forward with me, and when I said to them, you are lynching me by when I'm talking about the oneness, bringing it into the time-space reality that we're in now, and then when I'm talking about the time-space reality one, then you're going to the oneness. And once I portrayed it like that, the person really stopped and thought, oh my gosh, that, at least I'm guessing from the reaction they gave me, that they really got the difference between speaking on those different levels. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to, if I'm speaking on the oneness level, and if you're responding to me on the oneness level, then it's a really good conversation. But if you're trying to whack somebody apart by saying, yeah, we're all one, yeah, but I'm a male and you're a female and we're not one, and you can really play the whole contrast thing and really slap people in the face with that. But sometimes a lot of people who are discussing the subject really are not sure about which level they're talking on and which one is appropriate to be talking on. But it's very important to get that clear.
Well, I think there's also another thing too. I mean, you've laid it out beautifully, but I'd like to add one other scene, so to speak, more possibility, because I see this a lot. I've engaged in this myself, although I try to avoid it whenever I can consciously remember to do so. But people who will use the position of, thinking from the isness or from the oneness as a way to cudgel somebody else. Like meet them gently about the head and shoulders, like, oh, this is me showing I understand this so much better than you do. And, to me, it's basically disrespecting where that person's at right now. I mean, if the person who you're interacting with is nowhere near high vibration, all you're really doing is just pissing him off. You're not really actually helping him in any way that I can see, because it's too far away. It's like what Abraham talks about. If you're in depression, joy is like way out of reach. You can't get there. Go for anger or something like that. Go for something that's a little bit higher on the scale without being all that high up. And I think the same thing happens in discussion.
The thing that is challenging for me, and that I really appreciate about Abraham, is they really know where the person is vibrationally on that subject.
Yeah, they always answer exactly to that, yeah.
and they answer to that, and I don't always have that perspective. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes by people's reaction, I start gauging, okay, right, I've got it completely wrong, or yeah, I'm spot on. Mm-hmm. So, that's when the emotional guidance comes in, where, you kind of feel, does this, what I'm saying now, does it feel good or doesn't it feel good? Mm-hmm. And that's where mankind brought up the word ego. And, when you feel you're speaking with ego, then yes, of course, you do get positive ego. So, if it still feels good, then it's right. But most of the time we look at ego as negative. So if you are speaking with ego, then yeah, you're going to be probably hitting the wrong vibration to help the other person. Yeah.
And ego, I've said this many times on the podcast, that to me is a very, very slippery word, because one person's ego is another person's joy. one person saying, well, your ego is in your way, or your monkey brain is in your way, or whatever. What they're really saying is, I don't like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Not that they don't say I'm the one who is choosing this reaction. You are making me feel this way. Your ego is making me feel this way. It's you. It's your fault. Stop being the ego.
Yeah, I personally have no problem with the word ego, and I love ego, and I see the positive aspect of ego. Mm-hmm. And I always will. That's the rest of the world generally not quite seeing it from that perspective, but I really, really like the ego. Mm-hmm. And with a double-edged stick, there is a good side to the word ego, and when you're focused on that, it's brilliant. It's really, really good. Because the confidence people are often lacking in life are because we've constantly say, you got to watch your ego. You got to be careful what you say. You know, and there's all these things that are stopping people express and be their full selves. So,
I like the way you express that too. The idea of it being the two-ended stick, because it truly is. There is what you're labeling the good side as opposed to what you're labeling the bad side. And the labels are, arbitrary. We can call it whatever we want to. But the point is, there is the ego end, there's the lack of ego end, there's the experiencing ego, there's the I don't want to experience ego. I mean, you can express it in a lot of different ways, but it all comes up to the same thing. And I appreciate that, because when I'm looking for a way to say I find it to be slippery, it's like the stick itself is slippery. At times I feel like I'm grabbing the stick and all of a sudden I find them at the end, at the left end. And then later on I find them at the right end. It's like, whoa, what happened? The stick seemed to move in my hands. What's going on here? That's what I mean by slippery. It's hard. It's like you have to know what the context is in order to understand how people are using the word so you can respond to it and know how to react to it.
Yeah, I think that's really what a master is. A master can see clearly the vibration on the subject that the individual, wherever the individual's at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And that is to me amazing, because I mean, Abram does it to a huge audience of 200, 300, 400, 500 people, whatever. And they can feel the whole audience, and they can see when somebody lights up, so that they can choose them. And the way they light up is they've got the question, and they're not far from the answer.
Right.
And when somebody's in that vicinity, they pick them. So when they come up, it's not that difficult to take them from where they are to where they're going. And it's always been the big thing I've admired about Abram. It's like, wow,
absolutely.
If I could see that clearly where everybody was on the subject, that'd be amazing. And it's not impossible for me to learn that either. It's just, I've just got to open myself to that idea.
Well, unfortunately, our hour is past. We're actually over the hour, but it's been well worth it. So thank you for continuing to explore Richard Bach's illusions with me, and I look forward to carrying on the conversation next week. We're nearing the end of the book. We're right at the climax, so you don't want to miss it. Make sure you tune in next time. Thank you to our live stream listeners. Thank you to our podcast listeners as well. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.